Hello and welcome to today's deep dive on Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the top, as I'm sure you know from our previous deep dives, we are, of course, going full spoilers, and we will be talking about everything that flights our fancy during this, well, extended review. First released on March 25th, 1977. That version actually is no longer considered canon, as was a special edition released for its 20th anniversary on January 31st, 1997. Currently, this film has a 93% Rotten Tomato rating from 117 views. I, of course, am Mr. Nose, and this is my friend Andrew. And, of course, I'm going to turn it right over to him first off and ask, Andrew, what's your overall feelings on A New Hope?
Probably same as yours, Awesome movie, slightly dated, but still a classic.
Slightly dated. Let's just go like this with our lightsabers. Yeah, a little dated, but speaking of that scene overall, it made sense. Vader's a robot. Obi-Wan's an old man. In 1977, before it was fully fleshed out on what these people could do, it made sense that they moved very limited. But you made a comment a couple weeks ago that someone went through and did a re-edit with basically body doubles, and it's not great CGI work, but for YouTube it was decent, where he superimposed Alec Guinness's face over it.
Like 2 years working on that, 3 years, I don't remember.
But it brought it up to date, and if you could look past the fuzziness and the blurriness, it was a very interesting relook on what could be.
If they did a remaster, they could add that in and
remaster or remake. Yeah.
Speaking of CGI, no remakes. No remakes. Leave the movies as they are. If you want to remaster them, I'm all for it. You can go through and just completely change remake the whole movie, but leave all the actors and the scenes correct.
So you're okay with them changing the
I'm talking
fight.
Like the background. I'm talking like the background type stuff and things that don't actually affect. I don't want them going in with a new actor to replace Mark Hamill and everybody else. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to the technology, that's been a big complaint from Star Wars people. Well, that's funny, because in 1, 2, and 3, they got awesome technology, but in Episode 4, everything looks like it sucks.
Yeah, it was made
in 1977.
But
I'm saying they could basically green screen it, basically just go in, cut everything, and just do all new CGI behind everyone. Of course, that would probably screw everything up.
It would be very time-consuming, costly, and really, from my point of view, just clean up the effects you got. Now, this is the first time in a long time that I noticed, I think, the rotoscoping boxes behind the a couple TIE fighters.
Well, it's basically where they laid over the film on top of another piece of film.
It's the first time I noticed it in a long time. Now, I will admit, the version we're watching isn't the latest release. It was not the latest Blu-ray Steelbook release. This was actually the DVD release of 2000.
Well, and the other problem is they didn't really have that issue on the original release. It's because when they did the remaster in 97, the film was all dated. So, I mean, you'd think they could have at least done a little work on fixing it, but the problem was the film was dated, so that's why it showed up more.
Okay. Speaking of space battles, let's talk about that opening scene right outside from the crawl, where you got the crawl that goes up, and then you pan. I believe we pan down. I don't remember if pan down or panned up, but
it panned down, and then Tantive 4 comes in.
Tantive 4 comes over the camera, and it looks a fairly large ship.
Mm-hmm.
And then an Imperial class Star Destroyer, I believe it was it the Imperial?
Yeah, it's
what was the name of the ship? Do you remember?
The Devastator?
I thought the Devastator was the Super Star Destroyer from 5.
No, that's the Executor.
Okay. That might have been the Devastator. But anyway,
Yeah.
Tantive 4 goes over, and then the Star Destroyer goes over, and it goes on for what feels like ever, and it really shows the size and scope of what these ships are supposed to be. And it was jaw-dropping the first time that I remember watching this movie. My first Star Wars memory is of Return of the Jedi,
Yeah, same here.
but this
Because they played it on TV and my dad recorded it.
I watched mine with my mom on TV on Fox. It was 1989. But
That's probably the one that we had recorded.
but actually, that's my first. Believe it or not, that's my earliest movie memory.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to have seen this one 89, 90, somewhere in there, and to remember seeing that was crazy to me. It was just a huge scope, and it was unbelievable in my mind how they even could do something like that. And
I'm still hung up on the first movie thing because that is actually my first movie memory is Return of the Jedi, because I can specifically remember the fact that my mind could not contemplate that, like, I didn't know, like, they show the Death Star, the second Death Star, and my mind couldn't comprehend that, because I was going, oh, I've seen what's inside that, you know. No, I didn't understand when they were in the Death Star and when they were not. I thought it was a moon. I didn't understand the whole concept because I was so little, my brain couldn't comprehend. I remember all of that.
I remember my first viewing and what my first scenes that I remember, but I'm going to save that for Return of the Jedi.
Sorry, I got hung up.
Well, that's all right. So we're coming now. Retroactively, they went back to Rogue One and made this fit. But right here, we have Darth Vader after Leia has gotten away from him at the Battle of Scarif, and he's angry, but he's not.
He's had time to cool.
Right, and he is boarding the destroyer, and
The Tantive 4.
Sorry,
Corellian Corvette.
Yeah, the blockade.
Blockade
I can
runner.
remember it being called the Rebel Blockade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
And he's angry enough to hold Captain Antilles up by his throat. He's not even using the Force. He's just holding him up, choking him out.
And crushes his throat.
Yep. You hear it snap, and he falls. And this sequence leads into the only time I can remember anybody on film using the stun setting of the blaster.
Well, they learned after that. I mean, they go set to stun, and Leia just lays that poor guy out.
You know, she does that, and one of the funniest things is Vader and Leia have a conversation where she goes something along the lines of being on this political
diplomatic mission to
Alderaan, and he goes, "You are a rebel traitor, a rebel. You are how does he put it? You are a member of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away." Okay, you don't have. You can't. Okay, you just watched her leave from the Battle of Scarif. You can prove it. Though you're Vader, you don't need to prove it. She just murdered one of your stormtroopers? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Well, the problem is, though, she also didn't realize the fact that the Senate had been basically gone. You guys aren't in any position of power anymore. Goodbye.
At that point in time, she still was a member of the Imperial Senate, and it wasn't disbanded until 2 days later, a day and a half later. I think they used her incident being caught to legally disband the Senate.
Well, there's that, or it just took that long for them to get the information.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah, you have to figure they capture her, fly to the Death Star, then there's the meeting, and Tarkin walks in and goes, "Oh, the Emperor's dissolved the Senate."
Yeah. Because if I remember right, the way their science works, they can't receive the HoloNet in hyperspace.
Well,
Or can they?
Let's not go there, because if you recall, in a later film, there's a point where people are basically just sitting in hyperspace waiting for communication, and they can see each other out each other's window, and then they can just communicate with each other, which is something that apparently violates the rules of hyperspace based on every other film we ever watched. But we'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Because
That's like
if-
3 movies from
if
now.
you're thinking of that slow-moving speed, the slowest high-speed chase ever in The Last Jedi, they're not in hyperspace.
No, that's not what.
Okay,
Uh,
'Cause I'm
3
not-
movies from now.
so it's in The Force
Force
Awakens.
Awakens.
Okay, I don't remember that scene, so this is going to be an interesting
Yes.
watch.
But
So that brings us to Tatooine, because they're over Tatooine. And every time I see the stormtroopers looking for R2 and 3PO, I am reminded of the Spaceballs scene where they're going through the desert with a big comb. They're combing the desert for droids.
I don't remember. I haven't watched it in so long.
Mel Brooks, I don't think he's passed yet, but he's getting up there in age. He's
Well,
done.
he's like 99 if he's still
Yeah,
alive. if
he's
not
done
100.
some. He's done a lot of amazing movies with a lot of comedy that you cannot do today. In general, watch Blazing Saddles or The Life of Brian.
I've never watched that.
Did he do The Life of Brian, or was that Monty Python?
I've never heard of The Life of Brian. All I know is that he basically liked to push the limits, such as History of the World Part 1 was listed as being the most vulgar film in American history.
That was until one of Quentin Tarantino's films broke the record for using the F word, I think.
Well, in terms of vulgar, wasn't necessarily meant in terms of actual, like, speaking vulgarity, but in the sense of, the actions of the actors.
Now I don't remember if it was him or Monty Python that did The Life of Brian, but The Life of Brian was essentially about one of the apostles of Jesus, who was, it's a comedy.
I think that was Monty Python.
It could be, because I might be getting it mixed up with the History of the World Part 1.
Yeah, because they cover a brief portion of that with Jesus at the Last Supper in History of the World Part 1.
And I think Life of Brian had a lot to do with the crucifixion, if I
Yeah.
remember right. Anyway,
Okay.
that's way off topic. Yeah, because they were. I don't want to get
Let's
into
move on.
Spaceballs. So let's just go straight into Obi-Wan then, since we're going to talk about, because there's a lot about Obi-Wan and Tatooine that from a new canon standpoint makes me ask questions, because this is where in 1977, this is the first we've heard of anything in the Clone Wars. What was the Clone Wars in old canon?
Old canon prior to episode 1, 2, and 3 was basically all we knew about it was what Timothy Zahn wrote, which was fan fiction, more or less. And it was that basically they were creating a clone army. The problem is due to something to do with the Force, it caused the clones to basically all go insane, and a war ensued. And the Jedi and whoever else fought the clones and had to wipe the clones out. Basically, they found out the only way to, in the Timothy Zahn novels, the only way you could create a stable clone would be to create a non-force bubble using
The
Salamiri from Merkur.
Yep.
That they found out that something to do with metachlorians and all that fun stuff caused the clones to go insane. Now, once episode 1 and 2 and 3 came out, Timothy
of course,
Zahn novels
changed.
basically went out the window.
Yep. So we have that, and we have his first lines about Anakin and Luke's father, and then the death by Darth Vader. So we're not going to get into that part of the conversation until
Later.
the big twist. But there's one thing that I noticed in this viewing that I hadn't noticed before, is the look that he gives Han Solo in the cantina when he says that he did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs.
In less than 12 parsecs.
Yeah, if you round down, according to the Solo film.
And yeah, and Obi-Wan just kind of gives him this look like, are you serious?
He just kind of looked at him like, what? And I don't know if this is Alec Guinness staying in character, Alec Guinness not knowing what a parsec is, or Alec Guinness being the only one who knew what a parsec is. Because he looks at Han like he's an idiot.
I don't know if Alec Guinness actually knew what a parsec was, because of the simple fact that he hated Star Wars, he did not like science fiction, I don't think he really understood science.
Yet he is the only Star Wars actor to receive a acting nomination at the Academy Awards for this performance.
Even though he hated it. But hey, I mean, there's something you see similar with Star Trek, because Patrick Stewart actually hated being in Star Trek when he first got cast.
In 87 for...
He was basically, at the time, he was trying to get a breakout role. He was a traditional Broadway...
Yep, he was a Broadway star.
He loved Shakespeare, all this stuff. So for him, Star Trek was like... felt like he was just taking it to get something. And he couldn't stand it. But then they started throwing in some of the holodeck stuff and things in the first season, and all the other cast was working with him to get him to feel for it. He ended up eventually falling in love with the movies.
And now he's got his own show on CBS All Access, which, based on the last trailer, looks pretty freaking amazing. And I wish I had CBS All Access.
Yeah.
Star Trek Discovery is pretty good, too, from what I hear. But anyway, that's...
Yeah.
Whole other podcast.
Well, it just truly shows Alec Guinness's acting ability when he hates the role, but is still willing to.
He went for it. That's the mark of a true actor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to talk about the whole cantina scene. We have a Bith and the Bith band in the background playing probably what's the most iconic Star Wars music there is, even more so than the theme song, or Leia's theme, or Han's theme, or I'll give one song.
Anytime you see a Star Wars reference in regards to music of any kind in any kind of show, whether it's sitcom or straight comedy, it's always the Bith Cantina scene.
There's one other piece of music that I would say would go above that, and that's the Imperial March.
True. But you see that more in sporting events, which doesn't actually honestly make any sense to me, but...
Well, so... This is the film that also, I say that a lot, but that's just the way I speak. A New Hope is really the moment where we realize that Obi-Wan is a bad drinker, because he cuts off that guy's arm at the bar.
No, I'd say he's more old-fashioned. But remember, it's not the first time he's cut somebody's arm off in a cantina.
This time, he didn't have a blaster drawn at him.
Yeah. I think they were drawing blasters, because the barman was yelling out no blasters, and if you remember right, there was a blaster next to the severed hand. So basically,
yeah, you might
the
be
thing
right.
is the way they cut that is, if you don't really know the story of it, you don't really realize the fact that it wasn't just an arm he cut off. He killed them both. He cut the dude's arm off and killed the other one.
I don't remember seeing that. In
You don't really see it in the film, but he killed both of them. Which, I mean, hey, feel free. I mean, they are two, major scumbags. So.
Didn't they say they had a death sentence on
They
them?
had death sentences in 12 different systems, because they were basically... Well, they were...
One was a doctor.
They were...
They
were
were
a version...
organ
harvesters.
Yeah, black market organ harvesters.
Yeah.
And you see them on Jeddah in Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Easter egg.
Yeah, just a quick...
But basically means they managed to jump ship to Tatooine before, Jeddah
Just to get stabbed by a hot plasma sword.
Mm-hmm.
So this same sequence... Well, not same sequence.
Well, you got the meeting at the table.
Well, that's what I want to talk about, is that meeting. That one meeting that that changed from the original release to the special edition that has had so many different people up in arms that they kind of rectified in Solo, but I don't think.
Nah, Harrison Ford rectified it, plain and simple.
How do you
Han
think?
shot first.
But it doesn't look that way with
It looks like it in the original, and then
yeah.
they edit it. And honestly, that whole edit sucked anyways. The blaster bolts were literally like hair fine, and it just, the whole cut of it was horrible. Like, they literally should not have messed with it at all when they did it in 90, when they did the special edition.
Well, the what I remember hearing was that George did that because he didn't think that you could be sympathetic to Han if he murdered someone in cold blood.
But he didn't murder him in cold blood.
Though it looked that way. Because of how when he shot first, Greedo didn't shoot at all. Even though he had the intent.
Oh, in the original film?
Yeah.
That was kind of left up in the air just because of the explosions and smoke. You assume Greedo fired.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm still going to go with Harrison Ford since he is Han Solo. Han shot first.
Well, I believe that. Before we got there, though, this is going to be a running gag theme throughout the whole saga, is the accuracy of our stormtroopers. We hear, when we watch them board the Tantive 4, and later on in the film, when they're firing at Han and Luke, and while they're all running through the Death Star, over the shoulders, they can't seem to hit anything.
Yeah,
but
can you blame them? They're running around carrying these funky half rifle / things.
But not Jabba. When Obi-Wan looks, we're going to talk about Jabba. When
God.
Obi-Wan talks about the blaster points on the Jawas, they say that
Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
But they're not.
But you got to remember that the sand troopers were all carrying rifles. They may actually be much more accurate with the actual rifle since you can aim with them.
All right.
Whereas the general stormtrooper runs around with the E11 carbine, which basically is just an oversized pistol that they just go like this. Well, you're not going to hit the broadside of a barn.
There was also a comment from Luke when he was in armor saying, "How do they see out of these things?"
Well, we have the blooper. That also shows you can't see out of a stormtrooper helmet.
They added a sound effect later on when a stormtrooper hit his head on the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. They added the sound effect in the special edition.
So basically, we're jumping ahead, but on the Death Star, when C-3PO and R2 are hiding in a closet, the stormtroopers blow the door control. The door comes up, the stormtroopers go to walk in, and the third one on the right clocks himself on the bottom of the door.
That was the third one.
And it's just, if you're not paying attention, you don't even realize that he did it.
Yep. Yeah, I remember before. We're watching a DVD cut, so they did add it in the special edition. Just about every time they re-release Star Wars, they've added a sound effect here or there.
Yeah.
But
there's something I was going with.
Stormtrooper?
Well, it's just the accuracy thing. It's the fact is honestly, I think we've talked about it in the past, a long time ago. You have to figure they're probably trained with the rifles more so than they are really with these, simply because of the fact that if you're actually in a war, I don't think you're going to be fielding stormtroopers running around with an E11 carbine on a battlefield. It's probably going to be more of the heavier weapons and things like that, which maybe they're a lot more accurate with. You got to remember, the E11 and the armor in general, like we discussed earlier, seems more like it's for suppressing civilian crowds.
Oh yeah, absolutely it is.
It's okay, disperse or we will fire on you. At which point it's just pop, 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 pop. Yeah. Anything more on the casino?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about from Tatooine in general. They did add a scene in the special edition that wasn't in. Yeah, because
have you ever seen the original cut?
Yeah, it was just a dude in a.
It was a fat dude with a furry cloak on.
A cloak. I look like a vest to me.
Well, it was a vest with like a cape-ish thing.
This was originally a deleted scene from 1977 that they pulled out, and this was back when a Hutt was just known as a gangster. It was just like a title, not a species.
They hadn't really fleshed out the whole Hutt thing yet.
So there's a moment where Han walks behind Jabba, and in the original scene, he just walks behind him. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in the special edition, it had been established that Jabba was a big giant slug with a tail. So they had to find a way to edit Han walking behind him, walking over his tail. And if you watch Han, it's very shaky, very blurry, from basically cutting the footage, lifting it up, and lifting it back down. They probably could do it better today if they re-edited it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so awkward.
Honestly, they could have just left that whole scene out. The only notable thing is you see Boba Fett in it.
Yep.
That's it. And I think they actually edited him in there. I don't think he was in the original.
No, I don't think he was. I believe he was introduced in the holiday special in 78.
Yeah.
At least I think it was 78. I don't know, but I hear you can find it on YouTube. They don't sell it anywhere.
No.
It would be funny to see it on Disney Plus, though, since everything is going to be there. I doubt it. I don't think that's going to happen. So let's move on to everything going on with the Death Star. In Rogue One, we've seen it get built. We see the weapon, the focusing dish, be installed, and now we see Tarkin, played by the late great Peter Cushing, as just this technological terror.
Should we go with the Moff meeting scene?
Go ahead.
Well, in one of the first scenes on the Death Star, you got a meeting with a whole bunch of basically generals. I'm assuming there's admirals in there. You've also got...
was an admiral at that point.
No, he wasn't. Not anymore. He was a member of ISB.
Oh, that's right.
So there was a lot of debate years back amongst Star Wars fans about who's the Grand Admiral sitting at the table in that meeting, because Grand Admirals typically wear a white uniform, and there was a guy sitting there with a white uniform. Now, eventually they clarified it with Clone Wars, is Admiral Yularen, after the Clone Wars, retires and joins the Imperial Security Bureau, which basically it's their Politburo. Like the commissars of, say, Soviet Russia. Basically, these guys are investigating anyone and everyone that possibly is a threat to the Empire. So he ends up, I think, pretty high up, and that's how he ends up in the meeting on the Death Star.
He was close to.
He was close to the
top.
In the end, that's where Yularen meets his end. He's on the Death Star when it goes boom, along with a lot of other people. But during that sequence, you also get to see a few things here, which we paid attention. It's like in that whole room, you gotta surmise there's only two people who know Darth Vader's actual identity. One of them being Yularen and one being Tarkin. And you got that one Moff who decides to mouth off to Darth Vader and get himself choked. And that's, I think, the first sequence we get to see of the Force, dark side of the Force being utilized in the entire series.
That is the first we see of any Force use that doesn't deal with the mind trick. The mind trick's the very first one. Or Luke training with the lightsaber.
Yeah. So he ends up getting choked, and it's just kind of funny because from the perspective that you know who Yularen is, you just see Yularen just kind of passively sitting there just watching the whole thing, and you can only think he's just going, this guy's an idiot.
If you only knew, mate. If you only knew.
But it's also the only reference to the Republic in the entire original trilogy. Because Tarkin comes walking into that meeting and goes, the Imperial Senate is no longer an issue. It's been dissolved. The last vestiges of the Old Republic have been swept away.
Yeah.
It is the only time they ever talk about the Old Republic in the entire original trilogy. The question becomes is, how did they get rid of the Senate? But
Turn the gravity wells off on the daises, and they just all.
see, that'd be more of a discussion for some other kind of video. Just these ideas. They just planted
Ways the
stormtroopers.
Empire could massively kill people.
Well, my favorite one is basically in the middle of a speech. He's just going, "Okay, the Senate's done with," and stormtroopers march into the boxes and just wipe everyone out. But
Yeah, he could do that, or not even stormtroopers. Use his Imperial Guard.
yeah, but that's for something else.
That's just a whole. That's just.
But that whole
theory.
meeting starts showing you, that where everything lays. You got basically all these people here are basic tyrants.
Yeah, in one form or another. Yeah.
But you also get to see there's this, I don't know if you'd call it camaraderie between Tarkin and Vader.
At least a mutual respect.
Like in this film, though, it's like if you don't know all the story and everything else, it almost comes out like Vader is just kind of the lapdog to Tarkin.
Yeah, yeah, because it looks like Vader's just there to do his bidding, and that he ranks lower in the Imperial hierarchy than Tarkin.
It's not till later films that you discover that Vader's basically literally the right hand to Palpatine. So
It's not. No, it's not even Episode 5. It's Episode 6. It's Return of the Jedi that you really feel that out, because he gets a direct command from Palpatine in 5. And you get an inkling that that they're both Force sensitive, but that's about it. That they're friends, but not that he's the right hand of the Empire.
good point, because you don't even realize they're friends in 5.
You just realize
serves.
that they're both.
6, however, is where Palpatine addresses him as my old friend.
Yep.
But
Anyway, we'll probably talk about
Yeah.
that more in depth with Empire and Return of the Jedi.
one thing with Vader I brought up that I always hate in Episode 4, I don't know if it's a camera issue or what it is, but his armor just looks either dirty or just was not really polished at all. It always seems very dull in Episode 4.
that comes.
Whereas 5 and 6, he's all nice and shiny, and
That could have also had a lot to do with the technology at the time, the camera tech.
that's yeah.
Because if you notice, 3PO is disgusting throughout the whole film.
Yeah, but he looks dirty, like he's grimy. At least till he got his oil bath.
Well, he was still gross once they were on the Death Star. He didn't really
It wasn't
get
until the very end that
polish
he was
when
nice and polished.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could basically say
Reflection of
Vader's
lights and
dirt
stuff.
armor was dirty because he just got done wiping out a bunch of troops on the.
Probably still has
Mon
Mon-Cal guts
Calamari,
on it.
Yeah, and then goes from there
Oh, that's a
directly to
little
the
gross.
Corvette, and basically, it's not like he really had time to finish the buffing shop throughout.
And you don't know how much, how equipped that Star Destroyer is for him, because it wasn't until we saw the Executor that we saw that he even
Has
to
his
take
own
the helmet off, he
hyperbolic
needed
chamber.
it. Yep. Yep. So speaking of Vader and the Death Star, Princess Leia's in a detention cell, and Han and Luke come up with this idea to take Chewbacca and say it's a prisoner transfer. This is the first time I've asked this question while watching the film. Just how many prisoners are on the Death Star at any one time? And I ask this because you're a secret battle station the size of a moon. The last 2 times you fired, you have essentially destroyed planets. Why and how would you be taking prisoners?
From what I understood from old canon, is when basically what you see at the beginning of Rogue One is the chassis of the Death Star, and then you see the actual weapon being put in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what we've seen of diagrams, a good portion of the Death Star is mostly mechanical spacing, for basically fitting this housing. But
The reactor and-
you have to figure the Death Star is 86 miles across. There's a lot of space. They say that basically when Luke blew it up, he killed well over 1 million people. But from old canon, they haven't really addressed it in new canon, so I'm going to go with it. Old canon, once the majority of it was done, they began transporting a lot of information and data, a lot of Palpatine's like information, and like some of his private stuff was transferred there because he was going to move to it to rule.
That would make sense even
And
in
they
the new
were
canon
putting-
perspective.
Well, you also had the Wookiees that helped build it. Where there's the slaves would have been kept probably in prison there, and they started putting a lot of political prisoners that they didn't want anyone knowing they had.
Okay. Now, some of that makes sense from new canon's perspective. The Wookiees don't, because we read in Catalyst that it was the Geonosians that helped build the Death Star instead of the Wookiees.
No, haven't read Catalyst.
Which is fine. It's fine. But the idea of the political prisoners makes sense. The idea of now I do a blank on the point I was going to make about what was reinforced in new canon. Dang it! I don't remember.
Well, I mean, look at R2. R2 managed to actually
That's it.
access.
You were
When
talking
he
about
was tapped
this,
in, he accessed
the data.
basically the Imperial, Palpatine's database.
According to the in The Force Awakens, or I think it was a commentary track, I don't remember where I heard this, but JJ said that R2 got the map of the galaxy that led to the first Jedi Temple from his encounter with the first Death Star.
Mhm.
So what you're saying about data makes sense even
There's
from
a
a new
lot.
canon
Well, there's
perspective.
old canon, new canon. There's a lot of references to the fact that when R2 got into that computer, he got a lot of information that people didn't know he had.
Yep. Well, but what's weird though is, speaking of new canon, wasn't the compass that Luke picks up in Battlefront 2 leading to the first Jedi Temple?
Part of it. I think it contained the last part of the map.
Okay, I don't understand why. Palpatine, it was in one of Palpatine's stories, how he couldn't figure out that that's what it was.
I don't think.
Just a thought.
He might not have been able to use it.
Oh, maybe it could have been
It's
a
a
light
Jedi artifact.
Jedi artifact, and
The
too
other
much dark
part
side. That makes sense.
is like the only reason. We'll discuss what I just thought of after the video because it's going to be something to discuss in a later
Is
video
that for
we want to leave out here.
something for The Force Awakens or
It's
Last
going to be
Jedi?
Force Awakens.
Okay. Okay.
So let's move on.
Let's go on
Had a
to
revelation.
the trash compactor then, because the trash compactor scene is funny to me, and it's not the creature in. Why is that creature in there in the first place? Is
Well,
that
the
to help
creature
break
that-
down the material?
Yeah, it was something to do with breaking down the material, and I think to prevent like parasites and things like that from growing in there. There was an explanation, but the problem I have with it is how do you have this giant creature that drags Luke underwater and he magically vanishes into nowhere?
Well,
They're literally in knee-deep water.
and then he's gone.
Yeah.
But what I was going to bring up is that. But when Luke comes up, his hair is just slicked back and perfect. There's no metal, nothing in his hair. It's just like, what's up? I look slick now.
Yeah, but you also got to remember he burst a blood vessel in his eye during that whole thing and almost drowned because of some technical errors.
Yep.
Yeah, that whole sequence right there was just like you see Chewie pushing on the wall and it just stops. I'd say that they just had some technical errors there, but
So,
I had to bring it up during that sequence. I brought it up to him. There has got to be something wrong with C-3PO because R2 is reminding him to use the comlink, and C-3PO goes, "Oh, I forgot. I turned it off." Well, here's the problem. He's a droid. He should be able to remember anything and everything. So either he was designed with some serious flaws, or I don't know, because you can't forget when you're a droid.
he's 40 years old at this point from when he was created by Anakin, roughly, ballpark.
Well,
we can agree at least 30.
I'm looking
35?
at his Anakin as a kid built C-3PO, and C-3PO's got flaws.
Well,
But it makes him more human.
well, yes, but Anakin built 3PO out of scraps and spare parts.
Mm-hmm.
So those parts weren't new. So
They're
I can
degrading.
see them degrading, and like that one bad sector on a hard drive that keeps skipping every time you try to access it.
Well, there's also the whole thing, though, that basically most citizens of the galaxy apparently are afraid of sentient droids.
Yes, they are. After
That's
the
why
Clone
the
Wars.
restraining bolts and everything else. Well,
After the
even
Clone Wars, it
before
makes
that, I mean,
sense.
they've always used restraining bolts. I mean, basically, droids are just slave labor. You see that in Solo. I mean, you got the one droid who's pretty much sentient, who's fighting for the droid's freedom. But the main thing is like, if you want to talk about droids being sentient, probably the closest thing you're going to get is R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Absolutely, with C3PO or with R2.
Well, yeah.
Without R2, nobody would ever survive out of a saga film. Nobody.
No. He's literally the glue that's held them all together.
Except for
I know
Seven,
it's
wasn't really
like
in
not
Seven, but-
necessarily canon, but there was a book series in which there was a droid who was free, who eventually actually developed a force presence.
Oh, I really hope they don't bring that back into canon because that sounds
No, that
super
was
weird.
the Coruscant Knights series.
Oh, yeah, I skipped that series.
It wasn't bad, especially when you
Weird.
talk about who was the bodyguard for Padme.
The first one,
No, the second one.
the one with the solo eye patch.
Yes, because the first one he
Oh,
became a
he had
Moff in the Empire.
Oh, so did the second guy.
No,
Or did he die? No, Anakin might have killed him.
Basically, he hunted down
Typho?
he hunted down Darth Vader in that series because he was in love with Padme, and he'd heard a rumor that Darth Vader was involved in Padme's death. So he hunted down Darth Vader, and Darth Vader threw him through a Duracrete wall and basically broke every bone in his body before he killed him. After Typho goes on about how you killed the woman I loved and all this stuff. So you can only imagine Darth Vader's state of mind right at that moment.
Yeah. So they eventually let them go because they track them to Yavin 4.
The Millennium Falcon, the most easily tracked ship in the history
Not
of the
this chip,
galaxy.
sister. So I want to talk a moment about the design of the Falcon because I didn't get a chance to. I don't remember bringing this up during Solo. So you have a flat ship with a cannon on top and a cannon on bottom, and there's a tube that connects the two. But whenever you look from the inside to outside, the tube you're looking straight up out towards, and you're seeing the gun. So does that mean when you're on the top, you're essentially laying on your back,
Yes.
and on the bottom you should be hanging from straps?
It's artificial gravity. Changes inside.
So it'd be like on the top
You
hemisphere to the
basically
bottom
climb
hemisphere.
up, you grab the back of the seat, and then you reorient yourself, and you just basically... It's the same
Oh,
thing
that
with the
makes
bottom
sense.
one.
Because
Yeah.
it would be pulling you
And
back
that,
towards
but
the
when
center.
you're operating the guns, straight ahead's going to be straight down or straight up. So whenever you're operating guns, you pretty much have to use the targeting computer because anytime you're turning is going to be a below or above.
Okay.
It's a weird system.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the tunnels from before, but it just seems awkward to me.
It's always awkward watching
and-
that sequence.
Well, watching them in general, especially this one on how they pilot the Falcon, is hilarious.
because they basically just sit there and just kind of adjust speed and push buttons.
And it's like they're just random because he made some comment about Han made a comment about doing something and Chewie just nonchalantly throws a lever down. It was like, whatever.
I think that was based more on technology at the time.
Yeah,
They couldn't really make it look like they were flying around. I mean, you didn't really get any real motion from the Falcon until they did the special edition, and that was only in scenes where you saw them flying into Yavin
And if I remember
or escaping
right,
from Tatooine.
if I remember right, they've said that when Han asked George Lucas how to fly it, he's like, I don't know. You're the actor. You make it up.
Sounds like that
Essentially.
actually sounds like Lucas. And Lucas, you also have to remember, designed that whole scene off of watching World War II
Fighter pilots? Bombers?
bomber crews fighting off. So that's all they did. They literally flew straight. They didn't do anything, and guys and guns went. So,
Yeah.
but that sounds like Lucas from some of the things he does, where he just goes, "Wing it, figure it out. Not my problem."
So let's talk about Yavin 4 and the Massassi Temple. Well, not necessarily. Let's not get into the Massassi Temple because that's a deep canon dive that really doesn't get touched on in.
No, that's
But,
that could take all night.
We see Dodonna again. The Force. They're doing stuff above us and my family, and it's sometimes hear it through the floor. Anyway, the battle for Yavin.
Well, you get to see Biggs.
Who got a
he
sweet
gets
mustache.
Well, he gets referenced earlier on. He's a buddy of Luke's who joined the Imperial Academy. Now, that's the big trick there is most of the pilots, as well as a lot of the people that fight in the rebellion, are former Imperials.
Yep, Wedge.
They really are.
Wedge actually was a lieutenant, I think, even in canon. Or I remember seeing in Rebels that he was in the rebellion.
Maybe in
the
Rebel.
Imperial.
In old canon, he was not part of the Empire.
Okay.
Taicho Selchu.
His gunner?
No,
Was that his
one of his like 3 primaries from the Rogue Squadron
Okay.
was in that case he was from Alderaan, and his parents owned an actual communications company, so he was talking to them when the Death Star destroyed the planet.
The Taicho.
Yeah, Taicho. And when he found out, that's when he defected, is because that rumor came down that Alderaan was destroyed by the rebels, but it occurred to him that the Senate was dissolved prior to Alderaan's destruction. And he goes, he could understand if it went away after Alderaan was destroyed, but not before, so he joined the rebels.
He knew enough that he knew that what it really was.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember, I don't remember if publicly the reason for the Imperial Senate's dissolution was the destruction of Alderaan, or if it was Leia's turning.
I can only speak Old Kanan. I'm not caught up on New Kanan stuff, if any of it's even covered. Old Kanan, they dissolved the Senate. Then Alderaan was destroyed, and then word started trickling down through propaganda that the rebels were behind it.
Okay.
They claim that the rebels blew up Alderaan, which nobody quite made sense because Alderaan was a big supporter of the rebels.
I just don't remember what the Imperial explanation was for the dissolution of the Senate. I don't remember.
I don't think they ever really address what the explanation was, other than that maybe it was simply just that, well, we have regional governors now, we don't need the senators. I mean, who's going to question, really, other than people to join? But Wedge was from
He's
Corellia.
Corellia, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's Corellian, but I don't think he was ever part of any of the armed forces. He just was a good pilot.
Probably the best pilot outside of Luke Skywalker. All right. I've been holding off on this. Let's talk about Luke. He's a whiny brat in this movie.
Yes, he is.
And
But so's Leia.
well,
Twins, man.
and they don't know it. But okay, you bring up. I don't want to jump around. I want to talk about that later. Luke, I want to go to Tosche Station. What else? Freaks out about
Constantly on Han.
Han.
Constantly showing off in the cantina. We could almost buy our own ship for that.
I can pilot it.
Like, you don't know anything about any of this. You've never been off Tatooine, but you think you can dictate to somebody.
Which Han points out by saying, we can't just jump to light speed because we'll go through a star.
Well, I'm not a bad pilot myself. Yeah, you've been flying basically an atmospheric shuttle and shooting rats in a canyon.
2 meters, so yay big? Or
No, 2 meters is 6 feet.
Oh. That's much bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
That's a big rat.
So basically
huge.
he's just, I'd say it's like he's 18, he's showing off, all his friends have left, which begs the question though, kind of forgot on this. We're not really jumping around. There's a sequence when he's arguing with his uncle. Well, it starts off as he's trying to talk to his uncle, and it just kind of becomes, nope, you're going to do what I say. Luke wants to put in his application to the Imperial Academy because that's where Biggs and all his other friends have gone. His uncle keeps coming up with excuses.
More
and
harvest.
The reality you have to look at here is because he knew that if Luke joined the Imperial Academy with the last name of Skywalker,
Yep. He was
Vader
trying to protect him.
Either Vader would be tracking him down, or Palpatine would have had him killed immediately,
Yeah, somebody.
or captured.
I think it would have been.
hauled off.
I think immediately he'd have been captured and tried to be turned.
Yep. But I mean, you got Ben, who was basically trying to do everything he could to help Luke and teach Luke, but he wasn't going to go against
Uncle Owen.
Uncle Owen.
Yep.
I'm not going to start a fight with it and all this.
Yep.
But yeah, and Luke is basically just kind of a show-off, and he's a typical, he's 18, he wants to show off, and he wants adventure.
To prove that he's
and he gets to see
man,
Biggs, and he's going, oh yeah, and
let's go full throttle, be like
then
Beggars
Biggs
Canyon back home.
Biggs gives his
Would you
life
say? Would you
for
say that Luke's? No, I was going to ask if you thought Luke's attitude was what ultimately led to Biggs' death, but no, it wasn't.
No, that was actually the nature of the trench run. They explain it in old Kanan books. The whole point was the lead pilot, his primary goal was to dump his torpedoes, to get them into that hole. Everyone else behind him was literally back there to act as a human shield, because they knew that if pilots get behind them, they can't maneuver. If they pull up and out, they're going to get eaten up by the defenses. Still, like I said, I think that whole trench run idea was more for cinematic value than actual military tactics, because they could have literally just flew straight down, dumped their torpedoes down the tube, and then pulled out.
Depends on the angle.
No, it was supposed to be flat. It was flat.
Flat out, but I thought it was like on a tower, kind of like this, and was meant to go down like this.
No,
Not like
it was
this.
No, it was flat. It was a flat section.
Okay,
They were looking for the cooling tower as where the site was when they were coming down it.
Because I was under the impression that if this is we're going to use Charlie Brown here, that the schematics showed the straight on top, and then it would go in. But the trench run made it look like you had to come down this way, shoot it here, and then it would go in and down.
No,
like
basically,
it
it
was
was
trench.
programmed that when they fired, it would come in and the torpedoes would go and turn straight down it. It wasn't horizontal. It was flat.
Your thought was dive bomb it,
Yeah.
shoot, and then pull out.
Well, yeah. I mean, they could have even just dive bombed, dropped their torpedoes down it, and then pulled into the trench and come back out of it to get away. It was more cinematic. It's a lot
I'll give you
cooler to
that.
watch these guys flying around, getting shot.
A lot
inside
less
this
dangerous
tunnel.
if you think I don't
Yeah.
want to dive bomb and shoot a proton torpedo.
But there is that argument that the surface defenses were too strong, but there's also the argument that those were turbo lasers designed to destroy enemy warships, not to shoot down starfighters.
Hence the line of
They don't consider a snub fighter a threat.
or they'd have tighter defenses.
Yeah, they'd have actually had lower
Point-to-point
yield.
lasers.
Yeah.
So the only thing that stopped the trench run then was TIE fighters. The Intercom? XCOM? Who made the TIE fighters? What company?
Senior fleet.
The Twin Ion Engine. Probably the fastest fighter in the galaxy?
Considered, the TIE Interceptor, which comes later. At the time, the TIE Fighter was basically...
For a base unit, it had been the fastest one.
Yeah, it was their general purpose and use craft because they could produce them in high numbers. They had solar panels to help regenerate their power, which is why it it does make sense. They don't have hyperdrives.
The only one that has a hyperdrive is the one Vader's driving, his
Which
TIE
is
Advanced
the
X1.
TIE Advanced X1, yes. It also was supposed to have had shields, too. They don't really show shields well in the old movies.
No.
It's more like you see a laser and a flash, and there's no damage or something as their shields. But he didn't get taken out by being shot. He got taken out because one of his bodyguards panicked.
Well, he got shot though. The Falcon hit that one.
Nah. The guy on the right got hit. The one on the left panicked and went look out and pulled up and nailed the. And he hit the wall.
It's a good thing
and
he
Vader
died
went
because
like-
Vader would have
killed him.
tore him up.
But no, whether it's canon or not, the Empire did have craft similar to X-wings. They were called basic Gamma class gunships. They're
I don't know if that's canon or not anymore. I don't
probably
know,
not. It was from some of the games from
before.
basically similar to X-wings. They got dual lasers, hyperdrive missiles, things like that.
S-wings?
Shields. No,
No, that's wrong.
No.
All right. Okay.
but then you also had the TIE Defender. That
So-
was originally designed to protect the second Death Star.
I have a question, and I didn't really think about it until now. Yavin 4. Actually, no. This happened before that. It happened before Alderaan. We get the movie beginning with Vader on a Star Destroyer, and then he's on the Death Star. What happened to that Star Destroyer? Shouldn't it have stayed with Vader and the Death Star?
I think it docked. When you see the ships coming in, there's these big, massive hangars off to the side that you see going around the station. I almost have a feeling those are probably 4 Star Destroyers. Either that, or he disembarked on shuttle like he always does, and the Star Destroyer left.
Which is what I'm thinking, because then why wasn't that Star Destroyer out helping the defense? Now, I
Star
understand...
Destroyers aren't even good for dealing with Star
No,
fighters
but it would
anyways.
have helped.
Yeah.
And I
They
understand...
could have screened the Death Star before they got there.
And I understand that they were so overconfident in it led to their death. It led to
Wow.
that whole destruction.
Tarkin,
Yep.
are we going to evacuate in our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances. Which was honestly probably one of the very few mistakes Tarkin ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I really can't think of anything else that I want to talk about. What do you have what are your thoughts on it that we haven't mentioned yet? Is anything screaming out to you?
There was something, but I forgot what it was earlier. What was I looking at? No, that's about it.
All right.
Unless you want to discuss the hidden reflector for the Death Star. Okay, between the first Death Star and the second Death Star. First Death Star, you see these beams come out. They meet at an invisible point and go straight down.
Yep.
Originally, I guess George Lucas wanted to put something out there to calibrate it. This, you'd have to figure, is the nature of the plasma or whatever energy these lightsaber crystals give it that allow it to do that. Death Star 2 was designed to be more powerful than the first Death Star. So it got that straight beam, and it was also more capable of
Didn't that
targeting.
improve its accuracy, essentially?
accuracy, and they also developed it as a means to basically pick off the Rebel fleet once it was completed.
Yep. All right, so that essentially is our thoughts, our deep thoughts on Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. So, how would you rate this overall through the series of 11 films so far that have been released?
It's my least favorite of the original trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
but it still ranks better than at least 2 of the 1 through 3. I don't know. It's about mid-level.
I put it somewhere around in the middle. I don't see it as a bad film. It's absolutely a good film. Hamill, Fisher, Ford, Cushing, James Earl Jones's voice in it's absolutely amazing from '77. It's well done, and it's absolutely that kind of film that you could see inspire so many hundreds of filmmakers that we have today. It's an amazing film and an amazing universe, and it is that one film that is now 42 years old.
And people still want to watch it.
Still want to watch it, still love it. It is amazing. And with that being said, we're halfway done. We're roughly episode 4. Yeah, we're past halfway. We got 4 films left, and then a discussion on what we expect for episode 9. What have you thought so far? Have you been enjoying the ride with us? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for not a New Hope, for Empire Strikes Back. Till next time, have a great night.